Connection Private Limited is a cement manufacturing company that is looking to hire a unit supervisor with a minimum of 7-year experience to work in one of their largest plants in Chennai. In order for the unit supervisor to successfully complete responsibilities like effectively develop and optimize industrial processes and supervise operations, it is necessary that he or she must have the ability to work well with other plant employees. The company has completed screening candidates based on functional role requirements and is now assessing behavioral competencies to check if the candidate will be a good organization fit. In this interview, we will see Varun, the unit head, interviewing Aarti on her ability to communicate well with her team, understand goals of the team, and balance personal goals with that of the team. Let's see how the interview goes.
I hope everything is well with you at home. No trouble logging in.
Everything's well. Thank you so much. I did have a little trouble logging in, but that's okay. That got resolved. No worries.
Wonderful, wonderful. I believe you've already spoken with Sudhir.
Yes, that's right. My previous conversation was with Sudhir.
Okay, and you have complete clarity on the role that you applied for. Any questions you have there?
Not at this point. I don't have any questions right now.
Wonderful. So, just sit back, relax. We're going to, speak for about 30 minutes and, grab a glass of water, coffee, whatever works for you.
Sure, will do.
Varun only has half an hour to interview Aarti. Would this be enough time for him to gather all the relevant information to assess Aarti? Since Varun won't have the time to ask more than 3 or 4 questions along with the right follow-up questions as per the Probe L model, let's hope he's well prepared to make the most of the time.
Okay, let me start by asking the most basic question. Why did you apply at Connection? What brings you here?
So I've actually heard a lot about Connections. I've read that it's a very innovative organization, and that's what got me excited. And I would really love to be a part of this organization and contribute to its success as well. So,
thank you for your high opinion of our company. And Aarti, where have you worked before?
So I worked at the steel plant called R&R Private Limited.
And what were you doing there at R&R?
So I had actually joined R&R post my engineering as a process engineer. And then I got promoted as the assistant unit supervisor there. So right now I'm working as the assistant unit supervisor at R&R. So we are a team of about 10, including production engineers and project managers, plant supervisors, and we also have about 80 plus workers who manage the assembly line. So so that's the kind of role. So my role is more about managing the workers and ensuring taking care of the everyday operations.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you're working very closely with different team members, I assume, while you're overseeing operations. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct?
Yes, that's right. Correct. That's right.
And can you tell me, of some kind of a challenging situation that came, while you were managing this team or overseeing operations? Any challenging situation that you can recall?
Actually, there was this one project, where the engineers and the supervisors and the workers were kind of unable to meet eye to eye. So we were running behind schedule on a delivery deadline for a particular client, and that required everybody to work overtime. But unfortunately, it was around a festival weekend, so the workers refused to work overtime, and we had like an extremely difficult time managing that. So I had to kind of bring everybody together to ensure that we meet our deadline.
That must have been very challenging, especially during the festival time. I do understand. And Aarti, can you tell me something about motivation? Have you had a chance to motivate a teammate?
Looks like Varun started well with a good situational question to understand Aarti's ability to handle people challenges. He seemed to have covered the P, or the prevailing situation of the probe L model. But without asking relevant follow-up questions and knowing if Aarti was able to resolve the issue, do you think Varun has sufficient information to assess Aarti's behavior in the situation? What if Varun had asked a couple of follow-up questions based on the remaining elements of the probe L model? Let's see how the interview would have looked.
Festivals can be tricky. And was this your responsibility to handle the situation?
Actually, it wasn't only my responsibility to handle the situation, but considering that I had worked with a lot of these workers on a previous project, I'd worked with them very closely, and I had a very comfortable relationship with them. So my team thought that I may be best suited to handle the situation and bring everybody, get everybody to agree and align.
This answer says a lot about Aarti's work ethic. While the question was straightforward and asked with the intention of understanding Aarti's responsibility in the situation, Aarti's response reveals that she is an enthusiastic worker who doesn't shy away from taking on additional responsibilities.
And how did you handle the situation? What were the options that were available to you? What did you really do?
So we had like just a couple of options. We either could have convinced the workers to work overtime and on the or weekend, or we would have had to replace them with like other contractual workers for just those 2 days. Unfortunately, the process of getting the right wage workers for just those 2 days and training them was much higher, and therefore we thought that we first should try and convince the workers to do an overtime and obviously kind of compensate them in some way. So I volunteered to have a conversation with our workers first. I empathized with them. I told them that I understand the situation, but this was really a high-paying client, one of our biggest clients that we were doing this deliverable for, and completing this order really on time would, if you don't complete this order on time, it would actually lead to a huge loss and loss of income for us, and it could affect the overall business. It could affect all of us. So that's what I kind of try to bring out to them, that we are all in this together, and the success of the company also will mean success for them. So so even though I wasn't really required to do so, but I also thought I will volunteer and come into work that weekend, so that I can also lead by example, and they can they feel that they're not the only ones doing this.
Very impressive, very impressive. But out of curiosity, I mean, having this kind of a solution is tricky. How did you really approach this?
So I actually prepared some data around the per day productivity, the value loss that may lead, from the clients, and the impact that it can have on the overall performance of the plant. So I kind of gathered all this data. I kept that data with me so that I could show that to them and share whatever numbers and be as transparent as possible. At the same time, I also thought from their perspective of what could be the potential objections, how could we handle that, and kind of prepared as many answers to those potential objections as I could, and figured out that I could use the two, combine the two to really influence them.
It seems like Varun's comprehensive and open-ended style of questioning is allowing Aarti to divulge a lot of information about herself. Varun's questions are in line with the O, or the options of the probe L model. By answering these questions, Aarti has showcased her ability to be a self-starter and structure herself in difficult situations. Also, by dissecting Aarti's actions, Varun should be able to understand the the behaviors displayed by Aarti while resolving the issue. Examining this situation further will help Varun understand what the eventual outcome of Aarti's actions were.
What was the outcome of this situation? I mean, what really came out?
So, so the good thing that happened after this was every time we were doing something, or we were committing to a client with a deadline, we ensured that we had one representative from the workers union or the workers group as part of the project plan. So that ensured that their interests were also getting represented. At the same time, it also ensured that we also, if required, we also pushed back the client in case it was being unreasonable in some sense. So we tried to avoid a similar situation, and we had like different representatives coming in for different kind of projects that we put together.
Impressive. And any remarkable learnings that you recall from the complete situation and the incident? And also, I mean, if you had to go back in time, redo the situation, what would you really do differently?
Like I said, I think the outcome earlier was, that we kind of had one representative also coming out, as part of the workers union. That is something that was the biggest learning, because for all subsequent projects that I was leading, I ensured that is something that I definitely do that involve one of them. And if I could go back in time and redo this situation, I think I would have tried to involve the representatives early into the project. But in case if I couldn't have involved them early into the project, I would have probably worked more closely with the representatives, trying to influence them, and garnered more of their support to influence the rest of the group than approach the group as a whole.
By asking the right questions, Varun has also been able to gauge Aarti's learnings and if she can reflect and find ways to improve her solutions. This reflection may help in reducing wastage or errors in the future. Let's go back to the original interview and pick it up from where Varun had asked Aarti a question about motivating a teammate.
Okay, Aarti, just, have you had a chance to motivate your teammates, employees? Have you had that kind of a chance?
Actually, this was an opportunity that I got a couple of years ago. We had a fresher who joined our team. She joined us straight from her engineering college. She joined us as a process safety engineer. So she had potential, but maybe it was a lack of experience, or she was probably feeling a little overwhelmed in the industry, or maybe she was finding the pace to be a little fast. So we were not sure. I wasn't sure what was it, but it kind of started to lead to her poor performance. We started noticing small errors in her work, in what she was submitting. Overall, her demeanor was also a little low on energy, and she was kind of missing deadlines as well. So I kind of realized that this probably wasn't as much a skill issue, and kind of tried to reach out to her, spoke to her, encouraged her, and helped her overcome this little hurdle, this little situation.
And were you responsible for this individual's performance? Was she reporting to you?
Well, she didn't actually report into me, but I was part of the interview panel that selected her. So somewhere I did feel responsible for her performance in the company. So kind of took that onus on myself to work with her.
Varun seems to be on the right track with these questions, trying to understand the prevailing situation and the responsibilities that Aarti had or felt she had in the situation.
And what options? I mean, what were the options that were there with you? What did you really try to help her improve?
Um, since I understood that this really wasn't like a skill issue, I realized that she needed like, more confidence more than anything else. I used to check in with her regularly. So I had a choice between just kind of correcting her at her work. But I also kind of added to it and said, let me check on her a little more regularly. Um, while keeping an eye on her work, I also asked her what aspects of the work she was struggling with. I helped her out there a little bit. And kind of also mentored her in terms of solving them. So I kind of became her a point of contact in case she had a problem or in case she wanted to, get some question answered or something. So every time that she needed help, so she could reach out to me. So that's something that's what I've tried to do with her to work with her and help her improve.
Mm-hmm. But you're citing this to be a confidence issue. What makes you say that this wasn't a skill issue?
So actually, as I mentioned earlier, I was part of the panel that hired her. And during the panel interview, and even in the first few months of joining, her energy levels were really good. She was very confident with her work, and we could see she participating in discussions and in meetings as well. But over a period of time, I started to see that energy level also go down. I started to see that she was second guessing herself. And what I realized was probably that is what, I took that as a trigger, because it was not just the errors in her work, but it was her overall demeanor and her overall energy level that made me feel that she's probably, it's not really a skill issue and it's more like a confidence issue. So I wanted to work on that.
Looks like Varun is asking all the right follow-up questions. He probed into the options available to Aarti to handle the situation in detail and asks Aarti how she knew her colleague did not have a skill issue, to find out if the action taken was deliberate or sheer luck. If Varun analyzes Aarti's answers further, he will also be able to gauge the or the behaviors displayed by Aarti and her ability to empathize with teammates and take genuine efforts to help them.
That is very good. That is very good. So I'm assuming you really did help her. Aarti, and just out of curiosity, you worked in large teams. You've at R&R, and any time that you and your team together worked on a project and you weren't able to deliver it successfully. I mean, any project that you recall that actually failed.
Looks like Varun has dropped the ball right at the end. While he had asked excellent questions until now, do you think he will have the complete picture until he finds out the eventual outcome and the learning Aarti took away from this situation? Let's look at an alternate scenario where Varun does ask a couple of additional follow-up questions.
Were you able to help your colleague? What was this outcome? I'd like to know a little bit more.
So thankfully, I would say thankfully, yes. She has received a promotion since then, and she still is working at R&R, and she also got rewarded with one of our internal best employee kind of a equivalent reward. So she also got that, and she's been getting a lot of support from the other team members, as well as she's also able to extend support to other team members. So I'm feeling very happy with her success.
Wonderful, and congratulations to you. Actually, have you used this ability of yours to support any other team members in the past? Any incident that you recall?
So actually, this particular person, like I had mentioned earlier, because she was somebody who I had hired, I took responsibility for her success. But post this, I also kept an eye on on my team members as well as maybe other new joiners in the organization, and I continued to kind of structure my guidance for them. So I started having like more formal connects as well as more informal connects to just see if they were doing okay, if they needed help, or if they could do something. And through this, we started to structure and put together like a formal mentoring process for each of our new hires who typically come in from engineering colleges. So we put a formal mentoring structure also in place for this.
By asking specific questions, Varun got the opportunity to find out if Aarti's actions actually helped her colleague and understand that the incident shared was not a one-off incident. Aarti was able to structure her actions and use it in a manner to work closely and help more team members. These questions were linked to the E, or the eventual outcome, and the L, or the learning from the ProBell framework. Let's get back to the original interview and the question Varun asked on the failed project. This seemed like a good question if the intent is to gauge the candidate's self-awareness and their ability to learn from their mistakes. Therefore, it would seem that it is very important for a question like this to be probed further and followed through as per the complete ProBell framework to really understand the candidate's self-awareness as well as their ability to learn.
Aarti, and just out of curiosity, you worked in large teams, you've at R&R, and any time that you and your team together worked on a project and you weren't able to deliver it successfully. I mean, any project that you recall that actually failed.
Actually, there was this one project where we were kind of looking to implement a lean process into one of our manufacturing verticals. And what we had done was we had taken an ambitious target of completing the process revamp in a span of 3 months. And we were not able to reach the goal. So it took much more than that. And because there was also some kind of a capital investment that happened in it, we also kind of were not able to justify the returns on the capital that was invested in making this change. So yeah, we were not able to really deliver that project.
Why do you, I mean, I'm just probing a little further, but why do you think you weren't able to meet your goals?
So we realized that it was a case of lack of, a clear accountability, because this was something that we were doing for the first time. We really didn't assign clear responsibilities, and there were overlaps. And therefore, there was some slip ups that happened because people were, the team members were not sure of who really needed to own this piece and who really needed to work on that. So as a result, some things slipped up, and that delayed, the other element which was dependent on few of these, and that kind of delayed the entire project.
Okay. And was this the first time? I mean, was this the first time you didn't really define and track your responsibilities?
So not really. Typically, the team on all kind of projects has worked like this, where we broadly define the responsibilities and work with that. But this time, so we kind of took the same methodology. But given the scale, the nature, the size of this particular project, this approach really kind of did not work for us. And, we ended up not being able to deliver the project well.
Varun details the P, or the prevailing situation, a little more to understand the context and the background in which they were operating. This should give him a better perspective on the real reason for such a failure.
Understood. Okay. Sounds good, Arti. I think I'm good for today. These are all the questions that I had for you today. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask me?
No, I think I'm okay. I don't have any further questions.
Once again, despite a good beginning, Varun hasn't asked sufficient follow-up questions to assess Aarti fairly. Without understanding the actions taken by Aarti in the situation and the impact of this instance in future projects, his only takeaway is that Aarti has difficulty defining and tracking responsibilities. But is that the case? Let's see what else Varun could have learned if he had asked a couple more follow-up questions.
And this clearly looks like a case of miscommunication. Could you be a little more specific about your roles and responsibilities and identifying this miscommunication that led to this kind of a failure?
Actually, when the project failed, everybody was kind of blaming each other, and we were not really able to zero in as to really what was the reason. So I went back. I went through all the email conversations, the other documented conversations that we had to understand what went wrong, where did we go wrong, looked at our project charter and tried to analyze where we went wrong. And I realized that only some of the conversations were being captured on email. And a lot of the conversations began with saying, as discussed with you. So which means that these conversations were happening offline, but were not really getting captured. And as a result, it was causing a lot of back and forth, as well as, a general slip up in terms of understanding between people. So I think that was really the reason for confusion, that, there were a lot of critical conversations that were happening outside of a formal setup.
Candidates typically have a tendency to use the word we. It is important to identify the role played specifically by the candidate in the situation described, so as to measure his or her ability. The purpose of the question was to understand the R or the responsibilities that Aarti had of having to identify the miscommunication.
Understood. And what were the options that were available to you for rectifying the situation?
The only the option either was that we continue with the way we've always defined responsibilities and kind of work with that. The other one was to ensure that, most of our communication, at least with respect to critical projects, are completely documented. We are able to track everyone's responsibilities and actions. So there were several ways of doing this. We could have also done, we could have asked people, each team member, to write like maybe detailed emails, or we could have asked individual action items that could be put across to everyone else on the team. So when I looked at all of this, I thought the most efficient way would be to kind of create like a shared document and track responsibilities on it. So anybody who has completed it just goes and like puts a tick against it, or just puts a yes saying that this has been done, or in case there is some place where the person's stuck and can just edit the document. So we created a shared document which everybody, all the team members, would have access to, and that was what we took up.
The answer to this question has provided a lot of insight into Aarti's thought process. While the question was asked with the intention of understanding the various options available and considered by Aarti before she chose to carry out a specific action, her thought process also displays her be or behavior. Aarti seems to have an eye for detail, knack for organization, and ability to visualize the requirements to work with the team that she exhibited.
You laid out a well-knit structure and a tracker. I understand. What was the outcome of this incident, and what do you think were your key takeaways from this incident?
So one of the key pieces was that while everyone has the right intent to deliver something, but I think it is most important for the benefit of individual as well as of the project that we put like something like a shared document in place and we're able to track it. So for another similar project, I predefined and designed a tracker which was available on a shared space that everybody could access to, so that all were on the same page, and we would refer to that document during our meetings so that people don't miss out on any piece. So everybody could lend support where required and focus on their individual responsibility areas without any confusion.
Considering how Varun asked a question about a failed project to understand if there was a tendency to miscommunicate, the original outcome seems to be quite clear. However, by asking about the takeaway, looks like Varun is trying to understand the E or the eventual outcome of the responsibilities undertaken by Aarti to address this issue.
And if you could share one learning from this incident, something that you learned here and implemented into another project, what would that be?
So I had implemented this for another project as well, where I kind of put this kind of a shared document structure and started putting like periodic reviews, which were like maybe a weekly, fortnightly. So it was broadly weekly to 10 days kind of a review, where individual responsibilities were being reviewed and we were ensuring that everybody was carrying out their assigned responsibilities. And this is something, that I implemented in my next project as well.
This question on the L or the learning from the probe L model will help Varun understand if Aarti was able to learn from her mistakes and rectify them in future projects. While it seems that Varun was asking good questions to understand the prevailing situation, by not completing the probe L framework and asking the right follow-up questions, do you think he was doing justice to his initial questions? In the absence of the right follow-up questions, Varun was only getting partial information on Aarti's past performance. He seems to be walking away with first impressions or first responses to the questions he had asked, and as a result, quite possibly would have rejected Aarti's application. Had Varun asked the additional follow-up questions, he could have gathered the necessary information and learned that Aarti had demonstrated the behavior required to work well in a team. It is important to follow through the complete probe L framework and ask the right follow-up questions to truly determine a candidate's past performance and use that as a prediction for future behavior.